Hello everyone and welcome back to the Grumpy Surfer podcast. I'm your host Ads Lyson. On the podcast today I have a Bellator women's flyweight. My guest is originally from the southwest of England and through hard work, determination and a never say die attitude has become one of the best women's MMA flyweights the UK has ever produced. Training and talking from her gym, Flo Martial Arts in Plymouth, United Kingdom, we talk about her origins and her career. Please enjoy my conversation with my friend and Bellator women's flyweight, Kate Jackson. Kate Jackson, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you. You?
Yeah, really good. What have you been up to today?
I trained at my strength and conditioning gym this morning, and then I've been cooking, which really isn't very exciting.
Cooking anything interesting?
No, just loads of vegetables.
Keeping the diet going then?
Yeah, pretty much. I'm vegetarian, so don't have much choice.
What sort of stuff do you eat as a vegetarian and a fighter as well to keep you going?
I actually eat an awful lot of bread and cheese and milk, which is probably not a typical fighter diet, but then I just add in fruit and veg, so it hits protein requirements and all the other stuff. So yeah, it's not too bad.
Do you have like a set sort of like nutrition plan, or is it literally just doing it all by yourself?
I calorie count, so I kind of know broadly what I want to hit, like protein wise, and I more or less aim for like protein and fibre and decent amount of fruit and veg, and let the rest of it fall where it lands really. So yeah. Do
you have anyone that kind of gives you a nutrition plan? So did you work with anybody in that way, especially like on lead up to fights or something like that, or is it just kind of something you've learned as you've gone along?
I worked with someone in, probably 2014 was the last time, but I really, really don't like being told what to eat. I just find that a really difficult aspect of the sport, and not necessarily a necessary one either. So I have a pretty good grasp of nutrition now. I've done a nutrition course, so I more or less handle it myself. It gets a bit trickier, sort of dieting for fights, especially if it's short notice, which bar the last one, I haven't had for quite a long time. So yeah, it's not too bad apart from fight week, and that's always bad.
Yeah, what? Because you're draining. Do you have to lose? Do you have to lose much weight to reach the flyweight weight or not?
Normally, I sit about 4 or 5 kilos over. It depends how recently I've competed, sort of jiu-jitsu or MMA. Last one was harder because it was I had less notice for the fight, and because I was heavier to start with. And I blame lockdown, but I mean it kind of was. But I put on the weight deliberately before lockdown. I was lifting, and I was supposed to be taking it off for jiu-jitsu competition, and then COVID happened and ruined all the jiu-jitsu comps. So, yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine it's quite difficult because, I mean, from my perspective, I don't really like watch what I eat, but I know that my physical output is more than what I put in, so it kind of equals it out. And I suppose if you're training constantly like you are, being a professional fighter, you know, doing those bulk meal makings that you've done today, for instance, you know, must be just like a constant thing. And sometimes I can imagine it can get pretty monotonous as well. I feel a little bit weird because being a gentleman, it's rude to ask a woman, isn't it, about like their weight and stuff like that.
Not really in this sport, but yeah, sometimes. Well, yeah. I think that's weird anyway.
So let's go right back. So you are originally from Cornwall, aren't you?
I've lived there on and off since I was 10.
Okay.
So yeah, I suppose quite a long time now.
So when you were growing up in Cornwall, what were you like as a kid? Were you an active kid? Were you just sort of like an average sort of run of the mill kid? You know, I'm trying to get sort of like a comparison about like how you've got to where you are now and what you were like when you were younger.
I think pre about 10, I vaguely remember being out in the garden a lot and on my bike a lot. After I moved to Cornwall, it probably, that was sort of secondary school age, so it probably switched to, I swum a lot. My dad still does a lot of swimming, so yeah, I used to do a fair bit of swimming, competed a little bit. Apart from that, it was probably just school PE and, you know, just the normal walking backs and forwards to school and stuff like that from, I think from the train station was probably a couple of miles every day. But yeah, nothing out of the ordinary until I started doing, I did gymnastics as well. But yeah, nothing until I really started martial arts about 15.
Okay. Did you do your stereotypical question that's coming your way because you're from Cornwall? Did you get into surfing?
No, I used to bodyboard a bit, but I have eczema, and like the combination of the sort of the salt water and the sand has never done my skin much good. So not really.
Yeah, my niece suffers with that as well. You take her down to the beach and she's all happy, and then all of a sudden if she goes into the sea or if she gets sand on it, she's proper squealing. Like, you know, it's not that comfortable for her, I don't think.
No, I have a few memories of that like early on. But
So how did you get into martial arts then? What was kind of the opening factor for you? What was the X factor that got you into it?
I can't quite remember what triggered it, but I know one of my friends wanted me to start scuba diving with her, and I said I'd do that if she went to karate with me. And she did a few years of karate, and the scuba diving never happened. And I guess everything I've done sort of snowballed from that point onwards.
I can't imagine scuba diving around Cornwall coast anyway. You'll probably get a couple of days a week where it's going to be half decent to do that anyway.
I'm pretty certain she did it somehow. I don't know. I've no idea how it would have worked, but yeah, I didn't do it. But hopefully she managed to keep going.
So what flipped the switch for you to make you to want to go and do karate? Was it just something that, did you read a magazine or something, or did you just go, do you know what, I'm going to give it a go?
I guess I'd always, I don't know, so I must say like the idea of fighting. I didn't really know anything about it, sort of, you know, normal middle class upbringing. But I think part of it was getting to the point at that age where I lived like half an hour's train journey away from Truro, where I went to school, and so wanting to go and see my friends and being alone more, not even like super late at night, but you know, the walking from the train station to school and from the train station to the town centre and friends' houses. And I know my parents weren't entirely comfortable with me doing that on my own, which I still maintain was slightly sexist of them, because I don't think my brother got anything like that, but they'd deny it. So, and my brother's younger, so I probably wouldn't remember. So I guess there was a slight element of that. And I don't know, I remember one, must have been about 10, at I think a holiday resort. And I randomly had a fight with some boy. And I just thought it was a load of fun. And I know my mum absolutely lost it and said, what if he'd had a knife? And I was like, what? Some like kid at a normal holiday resort in Cornwall? I don't think so. So there's probably always something there to it.
Yeah, I think, especially back in those days, I mean, what we're talking here, sort of like the early 90s?
mid-late 90s for me.
Yeah, so, you know, I mean, everyone that gets into MMA, you know, the stereotypical story is we saw UFC 1 and we went to the video shop and it was there, and we got into MMA because of Hoist Gracie and stuff like that. But where I grew up, I didn't even know about MMA until I met Stapes. And Stapes was kind of like, I didn't really know that much about it then, and that was like 2000, 2004. I didn't really like get into or have any sort of like knowledge about MMA, mixed martial arts or anything like that really until sort of like 2013. So I mean, I did the stereotypical kid stuff where like I went to the YMCA and there's a bit of karate going on and a bit of roller disco and a bit of taekwondo, so I did a bit of that. Didn't like it because it was proper chuff. and then just decided that I wasn't going to do it. So it's definitely that early time period of trying to find those little places. I mean, did you do any like taekwondo or anything, or did you just stay at karate?
I did a little bit of taekwondo my first year at uni, and that was, I mean, by that point I had I mean, as judo brown belt, I had a vaguely decent grasp of what did and didn't work. So a lot of the stuff I was doing at uni was just because it was a student union club, and it was a bit of fun, as opposed to me thinking it was something that would necessarily work in a fight. I mean, I know obviously elements of taekwondo do, but I did a bit of taekwondo, maybe only 6 months of that actually. I think it was one of the summer holidays from uni, and I knew it was almost completely a load of bullshit, but it was kind of semi-entertaining, just to see what people thought would work. So yeah, I started judo about a year after karate.
Okay.
And got about as far as brown belt before I stopped to start doing MMA properly.
Okay. Did you do much groundwork with judo? Because I've spoke to a few people before, and there's always this catch element of where some clubs just do like stand up, and some clubs will do, you know, stand up and groundwork, because it's one of those weird factors in judo, isn't it? Where you kind of like, you either do one or the other, or you do both, or you do just stand up. That's it, really.
Yeah, it was definitely a mixture of the two. I don't remember in great detail, but it was definitely both. I was doing a little bit of submission grappling by that point as well. It was really early days of like any sort of grappling in Cornwall for sure, probably the southwest, and I'd done a little bit with Pedro Beta at uni, and I think that's probably it for grappling. But it was enough in the early days that I say it's vaguely competent. I wasn't at all, but for the level back then, it probably easily matched what judo was capable of outside of the sort of highly competitive levels anyway.
Did you feel after you were doing like your karate and judo and you know, dabbling in the other martial arts as well, did you feel that, you know, you were getting to a point? I know you talked about you got into MMA after doing judo. You were already kind of thinking what best would work in a fight anyway, or wasn't it until sort of like the latter ends where you kind of, yeah, let's see what happens in MMA as well?
I can't remember what, it probably would have been maybe early 2000s. I came across a blog online. I think it was London based. I still have absolutely no idea who it was. For all I know, it's one of the guys that's really, really well known on the scene now, but it was talking about, you know, no holds barred fighting, and how the sort of the dead drilling you do in a lot of the traditional martial arts doesn't help you be able to actually fight, and like the fact they were sparring with no rules and stuff. I really hope it wasn't no rules completely, but that's the first time I was aware you could actually like put everything together. And that was probably like 8 years after the UFC started. So how I didn't manage to pick that one up, I don't know. But it was it's probably like Rosie Sexton and Bodog fight. It was the first time I was properly watching MMA, and that must have been, I don't know, like 2004. And then Strike Force, I think the women in Strike Force, which is pretty cool because Strike Force is kind of semi-merged into, well, it didn't merge into the UFC, but Scott Coker was Strike Force and is now Bellator. So yeah, it's pretty cool how all this time later it's real.
Yeah, I think it's super inspirational as well, and you know, especially now where the Ronda Rousey kind of time where women's MMA came into the UFC has made that more prevalent for people, and I think it's opened people's eyes a lot more as well. I mean, talking from a surfing background, I find watching women's surfing far more interesting, and now I watch, you know, UFC, Bellator, and all the other promotions that are out there. I find watching women fighting and surfing, I find it's more technical. You can see the technical points in it because, and without sounding sexist, they're using the technique as opposed to like pure aggression and meathead like must smash to beat an opponent, as opposed to, you know, doing that to overwhelm somebody. So I find it a lot better to watch. Did you? So it was what year did you start doing MMA then?
2008.
2008.
Yeah, that's when I first started at Concept Gym, my Nuki gym, and I actually, I think I have mentioned it to Kenny, I did sort of a women's tryout thing at SBG Manchester.
Okay.
With Carl Tanswell. And I say to Kenny, I just remember this point where I had mount on someone, and it was the first time ever I like looked at Carl, and I was like, I'm actually supposed to hit her. He goes, of course you're supposed to fucking hit her. And I was like, okay then, like, here goes. So yeah, the early days were, it's not even really the early days, 2008, but yeah, it was it was very, UK scene was very, very different to the way it is now. So it's been pretty cool to watch the changes happen. Yeah,
it was really, really raw, wasn't it? I mean, you can even go onto YouTube and watch some of those earlier like productions and stuff, and you think, oh my god, it's literally like, you know, when you watch Snatch and they're doing like the backroom like warehouse fights. It's pretty much that with a ring in the middle. It's crazy.
Yeah, definitely. My first fight was 2009, and that was a decent sized show. It was supposed to be UK like MMA Federation formed or something. It's supposed to be
UK regional. I've got here.
Was it? I'm not sure what it was, but it was the first attempt at like unifying UK MMA, and I think there were about 5 shows happening at the same time. It was supposed to be part of that, and it all fell through. And it was, I think, the only show that still went ahead. And I fought a judo black belt who I'd met at the MMA tryouts in Manchester. She contacted me asking like if I wanted to fight, and I was like, pretty much, yeah, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'll have a crack at it. And that was my first pro fight, first ever MMA fight, and it lasted 48 seconds because I hit her a lot, and she told me afterwards that she'd been having temper tantrums when the guys hit her in training. So I guess that carried over to the fight.
How was that build up for you? Because was that your first fight, or was that your first professional fight?
It was my first fight completely. I'd done judo comps, but It was the first time I'd done anything like that. Didn't really know what I was doing. The adrenaline, the build up for that one was absolutely insane. My coach said he thought I was gonna. He said he'd never seen anyone's eyes like that dilated with adrenaline. He said he thought I was gonna bottle it. But I still remember like walking out. That's the moment that it all sort of fell into place, and yeah, it was. I mean, I still didn't know what I was doing because I had Mark Goddard reffing that fight, and I TKO'd her up against the cage, and he stopped it, and I kind of thought it was going to be like kickboxing, like you get standing counts and you'd start us again. I don't know how I got to that point, but I honestly didn't know the fight was over until he like properly ended it and confirmed that it was over. So yeah, I mean, someone going to their first pro fight now would, well, that would be horrifying. But yeah, back then it was definitely different.
Were you one of these people that as you were walking out you needed to psych yourself up to do it, or was it just a case, sitting in the back in it probably was a squash court or something like that, or like some dingy little, I don't know, you see these films like Warrior where they're like training in the kitchens and stuff out the back of a hotel?
Yeah, I think it was just a normal changing room in a big leisure centre. I think, but like, it's definitely changed over the years. Like back then, I didn't really need to hype myself up. There was a lot of like uncertainty, a lot of adrenaline involved. I think now maybe I could probably do with a little bit more. I don't know, switching on a little bit more before I fight, which is probably something I'm going to need to work on a bit. But it's like anything you do for a long time, like things change. You just need to like work out how or if you're going to deal with that.
Did you not feel afterwards, did you have any sort of like hindsight on it where you were going, I'm a girl from Cornwall, went to school in Truro, and I've completely sidetracked what the normal path of somebody from that walk of life would be, and I'm now secured in the cage. I've just beaten somebody up against the fence, and now I'm a pro fighter. Did that kind of sink in? Did you think of it that way, or was you just kind of go, how did I get to this point?
No, because then it was just kind of a pro rule set. It didn't really mean anything at that point, I don't think. I know my parents didn't have a clue like what it was and what I was doing. I just know they were really, really relieved when I phoned them and told them that it was all okay. Like it all went well.
Did you get to a point where you kind of went, do you know what? This is my career path. This is what I want to do. Did you ever have that conversation with them?
Way later, I think that was 2013, after I'd fought Joanna, and I think I had a conversation with my mom, because I told my mom, like, there was at one point where I was being hit on the floor, and I told my mom that all I could think about at that point was shit, like my mom's going to be absolutely livid about the state of my face, which is not something that has ever happened since. And I told her that, and that was the point. She's like, if you're going to do this, then we'll be there. We'll support you. Like, I don't ever want you to worry about what we're thinking or anything along those lines. So I think it, and I don't blame them. It took them. They still don't like it. They don't like. They'll occasionally watch the sport. They watch my fights, and I think until I finish, they can't move past the fact that anything they see could be happening to me.
Yeah, I think any parent, being a parent, seeing their daughter or their son in something like that, must have been quite worrying. I mean, again, from my kind of perspective, when I first went away to Afghanistan, I didn't even have it's going to sound really selfish, I didn't have a thought in my head about what they would feel about me going away. And then probably until you've even had that conversation with them, you probably didn't have that either, really, or did you?
No, I always knew.
Okay.
I always knew they didn't like it. Were uncomfortable with it. And I know. Oh, was it? It was my. I had my second pro fight in 2000, towards the end of 2010, and I fought again 3 weeks later, and it was semi-pro, which shows how weird the rule set was back then. And I didn't even tell them about that fight 3 weeks later. I figured they'd already had enough, like the one I just had. And I know my sister, my best friend, and her boyfriend at the time had watched that one as well, and I know they found that difficult. And like my parents couldn't go, and my best friend's boyfriend was absolutely horrified by the whole thing. Like her current boyfriend, like he messages me about it. He finds the whole thing really interesting, but I know at the time he was just he was horrified, and I'm not sure he's ever really got past that point.
Because there's definitely that stigma behind MMA. It's tethering out now because it's more mainstream, but you know, the stigma was, oh, you're a cage fighter, you're a prize fighter. A little bit like that, to be fair. Or do you think?
Well, I still hate the term cage fighting.
Do you?
Yeah. And
even though you've got Cage Warriors.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's a big UK show. Can't really do a huge amount about that.
Can't really just say like change the name because it's old school.
No, I mean, I just don't like the term cage fighting. I hate when I have to resort to explaining the sport that way after I go through a sort of list of ways of explaining it, and then finally, grudgingly, I use cage fighting, followed by the fact, but it's a professional regulated sport.
It's just like boxing, but in a cage. Yeah, I don't know. Like, no, but you're a cage fighter.
It's not really. I mean, we've got a cage like just out out there. It's not.
Well, you have grappling matches in the cage. What are you gonna say? Those grapplers are cage fighters too.
Yeah, well,
I don't know.
I don't really see it as a. Well, I would say cage is a weird term anyway.
I guess it's definitely people's perspectives, isn't it? It's the way it's, especially if people don't understand it, and I think that's a big thing with MMA, is that if people don't understand it, then they're going to probably either frown upon it or just kind of dismiss it a little bit sometimes, because it's not kind of the norm, is it? Like if you said to somebody, I don't know, like Mike Tyson's fighting, you know, there's a boxing match coming on, people would be like that. Yeah, let's watch that. But then if you put MMA on, there's still kind of, you know, a percentage of people that really kind of still have that stigma with it too. I think it's definitely changing because the UFC is like a massive brand, and so is Bellator as well now. And because you've got them on like Sky Sports, and they're on BT Sport, and you know you've got your Conor McGregor's and all these big name stuff that are coming out. It is kind of exposing a little bit more, and people are a little bit more interested in it, I guess. I mean, I don't know, how do you see that?
I mean, it's finally, I think, being reported on in the Telegraph, BBC Sport. Bellator has been on Channel 5, like prime time.
Oh, that's right, yeah, it's had a couple of fights on there, hasn't
and
it?
I think their first Paris show was BBC 1 or 2. So that's a massive difference to where we were even at 5 years ago, really.
Yeah, it's crazy. You know, do you know what? I actually forgot about that. Yeah, it's like almost kind of like putting, I don't know, kabaddi on Channel 4 back in like the 90s. You know, you had this Indian like tag sport that was on there, and now you've got, you know, like you say, you've got MMA and stuff that is on prime time. You know, channels 1, 2, 3, and 4 that we used to watch when we were younger and stuff. And it is kind of crazy how it's come about that way. One of the questions that I wanted to ask you is, you trying a concept in Cornwall. when did that become like an affiliated MMA gym? Because like you're saying, in those early days, there was only a few places like in the main cities like Birmingham and London and Manchester that had that. How did that come about?
So Mark Rowlett, who's the head coach there, I think had a kickboxing background, and he started jiu-jitsu with one of my nogi coaches, who's now a black belt. I don't even know, it's probably 2006, 2007, and opened it up concept with his business partner in 2008, and it was sort of a fair amount of kickboxing there. It was until the last few years, I guess, 4 years, it was, I suppose, predominantly like a kickboxing gym. But we've always had MMA there, and Kevin Darrington, like Kenny's black belt, is the grappling coach there. There's a few more of us that teach, like, a bit as well. But yeah, that, and I think Mark Tucker and Liscard were the early MMA gyms in Cornwall, and I think still really the only MMA gyms in Cornwall.
Let's talk a little bit about like your career. So your record at the moment is 11-5-1. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And you've been in 8 productions so far that I counted. Wikipedia and Google's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
So so you talked about your first fight, which was the UK regional one, and your second one was the Zone FC.
Really? God. Oh, that one might have been. I think that was a big one. That was. Oh, I think that was my 3rd pro fight, my 4th MMA fight. And that was in Sweden. Is that right?
I'm going to say yes because I didn't write the locations down.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about that. But yeah, I'm pretty certain the Zone was. I think at the time it was a fairly big Swedish show. That was one I took on, probably 2 or 3 weeks' notice against someone that was ranked in the top 10 at the time, and probably one I shouldn't have taken. But I did, because fights were really hard to come by, and I lost the decision in that one. Something terrible, but yeah, I couldn't quite pull the trigger on I don't know. It's a very long time ago, and yeah, the details kind of get lost. But it was, yeah, I have no complaints about the show. I can't remember where in Sweden it was, but yeah, that was definitely one of the early ones.
When did you realise? At what point did you kind of go, this is going to be me now. This is where I'm going to make my living. And was it when you started getting sponsors, or when did it click in your head? You go, yeah, this is me.
I don't know about making a living, because like pre-UFC and Bellator, properly picking up the women's divisions, that was almost impossible.
Well, that was round about 2013, 14, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
But I think I started training a lot more after I'd separated from my ex-husband in, I think, 2011, towards the end of 2011. So I guess it was probably like early 2012. I think I had 2 fights in the first half of the year, and I trained like properly for those, and probably kept going from that point, from like 2013 onwards, I think.
It's quite interesting, and you've kind of opened another question up for me here. Is that what did you do for work as well as training MMA and fighting? So what did you do as a job?
From about 2009 or 10, I think, until The Ultimate Fighter in 2016, I managed a restaurant in my hometown, and that at least meant that I could do my own. I set the shifts, so I could train around or work around my training. So it wasn't quite managing to train full time, but I could at least train. I can't remember what I was doing in the end. I was doing stuff like working Saturday and Sunday evening when there were no classes on, and then some of the daytimes, and then having like one weekday daytime off so that I could do like 3 or 4 sessions during the day. And I think at the time I was like working with one of my coaches in Newquay, and then going to I don't know how I did that. So I was driving to Newquay to work with a coach, and then going on to Penzance to work with Kev Darrington. And then there was at one point I was going from Penzance to Plymouth to train with Kenny and you guys here, and then going back again. So that was like 200 miles in one day for training.
That's mental.
Yeah, I don't know how I did it. I mean, it's one of the reasons I've moved to Plymouth full time, because this year in particular, where I'm doing almost all my training at Flow, it's not that far, it's only like 70-mile round trip, but it was just getting home, being at the gym at 10 o'clock in the morning, and then getting home at 10:30 at night, and then having to be back again 10 o'clock the next morning. And it was just, it was like too much, like being able to eat properly and stuff when I didn't even have enough time at home to, like, barely enough time to sleep, let alone cook, was, just not ideal.
That's a hardcore routine, isn't it? But doing all those miles. I mean, you do hear of people, fighters, and people that are dedicated to something, putting in those long drawn out drives to try and go from one place to another, and hats off to you to doing that, for being like super dedicated to it. But I think it would also be quite breaking as well.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how I did it for so long. I mean, it was because I lived halfway between both gyms, and at the start I trained more at Concept, and over the years I've started training more at Flow. And it was just making that final decision to move to Plymouth and Flow full time. And I only go back to Cornwall sort of once a week to train with my no-gi team there. So that's, it was the other way around. Probably I started training with Kenny maybe 2013 or 14. So yeah, it's been a gradual change, and possibly one I should have made earlier, but I've finally done it. So yeah, it's interesting, I think, to see what happens working full time with one team.
Do you find it's a little bit of a relief knowing that you're in one location now, as opposed to driving all over the place? Yeah,
I think. I mean, I still have, like, and there's the affiliation as well. I still have, like, Pure Grappling, which is my no-gi team in Cornwall. And, we still have group chat, and I still talk to Kev, and he's still one of Kenny's black belts. So the link's still there. But it's really good finally having, like, a large team that I train out full time, and, coach here as well. So, yeah, that makes a big difference.
So going back a little bit again, so we were talking about the Zone FC, and then you had a couple of fights in a production called the Tear Up. Do you remember those?
Oh yeah, it's a Bristol show.
Yeah.
Jake O'Hagan, who is, I think, the owner or joint owner of Impact in pretty certain it's Impact in Bristol, and they had quite a few shows. Probably 2011 to like 2014, and they managed to, I don't know how many opponents I had with them in the end. Don't know if it was just the 2 shows back to back, maybe, and they tried after that, but there weren't very many women doing the sport in the UK at the time, so we kind of ran out of potential opponents here, and I moved on to, I think, fighting in Finland 3 times.
Which was called, I think, one of them was called, I couldn't even pronounce it when I wrote it down. It sounded like Professional Liga was one of them.
I don't know. It was 2 of them. They were the same shows. They were in different cities.
And then the other one was called I can't even say it. Lepenratina Fight Night.
Lappenranta, I
That's
think.
the one, yeah.
Yeah, so they were all, I think all 3 of them were the same organisation. 2 were in Lappenranta, and 1 was somewhere I don't even remember now. Although I remember wandering around the town square in flip-flops in probably April or May with snow on the ground. Which, it's quite cool that I've got to travel so much, really.
So you've had some fights with some, quite high-profile people. The 3 I've got written down here, we'll talk about the first one because that was kind of the first one, was Joanna Jędrzejczyk. You had a fight with her, and that was the Professional Liga one.
No idea what the show was called.
That's what it was called.
Okay.
I'm not telling you.
I'll take your word for it.
It's what the computer said.
Yeah, absolutely no idea. But I think it was quite a big show in Poland.
Okay.
And probably not one I should have taken. Fighting on other fighters' home shows, I think, is not. I wouldn't say never do it, but
not the greatest of ideas.
No, not always. It's one thing I really, really appreciate about Bellator. Even if sometimes they maybe prefer a certain fighter, it's a very professionally run show, and they're impartial. So you don't always get that on smaller shows or shows that are run by a fighter's own team.
How did a girl from Cornwall that trains in the southwest even get a fight asked to her to go to Poland? How did that even happen?
Absolutely no idea. Maybe they found me through Tapology or Sherdog. Don't really know.
Because that to me is crazy. Like, out of the whole of Europe and the UK, the globe itself, because round about that time, the internet was still, quite prevalent as well. It was kind of coming into, its wheels were starting to roll. And there you go, there's Kate Jackson, she's from Cornwall. The little leg of England. Yeah, we'll have her.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how they found me at all.
How did you find that fight anyway? Because she's a predominant striker, isn't she? And I can imagine that you would have been quite into grappling and stuff as well.
Yeah,
so
I mean, earlier on I was known as a striker,
okay.
Somewhat ironically, because my striking's fine, but it's not where I'm most comfortable, as my last fight showed. But yeah, at that point, apparently they were worried about my striking, which is probably especially funny given the trajectory of both our careers. But yeah, I can't remember what happened. I mean, first round wasn't too bad. But I think she pretty clearly won the second, and I think I took a head kick that caused quite a big hematoma over one eye, and I know between the second and third, I couldn't see properly out that eye, and I think the doctor was hesitant to stop it because under that rule, it wasn't even the unified MMA rules, which I'm not even sure back then were that unified. But I vaguely remember the doctor wouldn't stop it between the second and third round, or wouldn't. My coach was asking the doctor, what do you think? And he was just going, I don't know.
Classic.
because I think it would have gone to the judges' scorecards, and I'm sure she probably would have won that way anyway.
I was in Poland, so.
But my coach called it instead because he didn't think that I was in a fit state to go into the third, which I would not appreciate any of my coaches doing now, I don't think. Although I guess I trust them to make that decision. But if you're fighting on a show where you can't rely on the staff and the doctors and the commission, then you don't really have much choice. So
yeah, I can imagine that's a difficult call. And like you say, this was like pre-2013 that we were talking about earlier. When it just started coming into fruition, women's MMA. And I can imagine everything would have been up in the air. And like you're saying, the doctors like that. Well, I don't know. It's kind of a weird transition, really. I think.
Yeah, I mean, even now, like as a corner, that's I do coach in corner now. That's a difficult position to be in, and I'm glad now that even the vast majority of the smaller shows, they'll be competent enough for the ref and the doctor to make that decision themselves.
Yeah. I think that there was a real controversial UFC fight a couple of months ago where the guy just wrapped his bangers in. Do you remember that one? I can't remember his name. It was after the first round and he just decided, no, I'm not fighting.
Oh yeah, he wanted to stop and his corners wanted him to keep going.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's just. I don't think it was even heard of then. Like that. Why would you? I mean, where are you going to go from there? It's crazy. So after the two European productions, how did you end up on The Ultimate Fighter? So it was The Ultimate Fighter 23.
Yes. I was thinking about dropping down to strawweight because I thought I could make it, and I thought it might open up more fight opportunities. And when that was announced, I was having people sort of asking, like, are you going to go for it? Are you interested? And I was like, okay, yeah. So I'm going to take this opportunity. I'm going to go for it. And probably wouldn't have done if one of my friends, Kerry Hughes, she used to fight at bantamweight. She's retired now. But she said, and we were just messaging a bit at the time, she said she'd go out with me. So we booked it together and we shared a hotel room in Treasure Island Casino. And we did the tryouts together. And I don't think I was outgoing enough for them at all, which has been a problem my whole career. But I think I was the very bottom of their list, and I just scraped through onto the show. Weight cut for that was absolutely horrendous because even then I could make flyweight, but even then I know how to cut weight now. I know how to carb deplete. I know how to water load. I know how to exactly what my body needs in order to sweat the weight out if I have to, which I try not to do at flyweight. But back then it was complete trial and error. So I think I was 123 pounds the morning of the day before the weigh-in. And that's not the end of the world now. I don't like doing it, but I know I can. But back then, getting that off, I don't know if I slept at all that night. The bath wasn't the bath was a really weird shape. So making myself stay in the bath was really, really hard. I was trying to do it in the gym. I was in the gym for hours with a sweatsuit on, trying to get that weight off. I got them to take me to the sauna at 4:00 in the morning, and then went back to the gym, and I don't know, it was on cross trainer maybe, and yeah, I made it 116 pounds completely naked. And I've never had such, actually, I've had one harder cut than that, but I knew what I was doing at that point, at least.
This was for the trials, yeah?
No, not for the trials themselves. That was making weight to get into the house.
Okay.
So you didn't have to make weight for the tryouts. They literally just you swim the scales, they wrote down whatever weight you happened to be at the time.
It's just cracked on.
And yeah, I'd say they didn't really care. I suspect they didn't really care within reason, because they're used to people doing 20, 25 pound cuts, or starting off at that weight anyway. But yeah, the trials were really short. So you'd fill out all this stupid paperwork, loads and loads of it. But all the stuff I absolutely hate, tell us something interesting about yourself. But it's but all of us do the sport. And I was like, well, that's me screwed. That's the only interesting thing about me. They want something else. I was like, I don't have that. No.
I like going for walks on the beach with my dog, and I like picking shells up.
I know. Well, it's pretty. I know some people do really they're avid gamers or whatever. Not that I'd say that's particularly exciting. Or they do another sport, or they rock climb. But I still don't see how any of those things are anything particularly out of the ordinary. But I think we did 2 minutes of pad work, and you waited around for ages, all sitting on mats in a conference room at one of the big Vegas hotels. And then they called you off, and you literally did 2 minutes of pad work with a stranger while they watched, which is really hard because if you don't know someone else's striking cues, it's difficult. And then I think we had a 3-minute grappling match. They paired you up against one other person. A 3-minute grappling match, but we weren't allowed to start standing because they didn't want us. They didn't want the wrestling off the edges of the mat, I don't think. So starting on your knees against someone else competitive who can wrestle, who is not willing to pull guard, and you're evenly matched. I had, and I didn't even realise until I went out to Jackson Wink a couple of years ago, but I had Jodie Escobar, one of the Jackson Wink girls, and we basically wrestled on our knees in the clinch for ages, and it was really, really crap. So I eventually pulled butterfly guard, but I couldn't sweep her from there, and she couldn't pass my guard, and it was just the most boring match imaginable. So yeah, I don't really know why they chose either of us based on that. But
doesn't really matter. You got in at the end, so
yeah, just.
So talk about that experience about being in that house and kind of because it is a production, really, isn't it? It isn't an MMA UFC 256 or something like that. It's not it's a TV show, isn't it? Really.
Yeah, which I didn't properly. I mean, I don't know how you would realise unless you've done anything like that. Didn't really hit home until I was actually there in the house. It was the whole run up to it. We were we had to hand our phones over to the production team once we'd made weight. As soon as we made weight, we had to hand our phones over to the production team, and then you're stuck in the hotel room with no outside contact, and then you had the build up to the fight, and you were all in minibuses, and you couldn't go anywhere unescorted because they were suddenly responsible for you. So you basically had a babysitter go with you absolutely everywhere, and for an adult that's used to doing things on their own, losing your phone and then losing your independence, that was horrendous. And so I had the fight to get into the house, and it was against Irene Cabello, who I'd met once before at a training seminar in the UK. She's Spanish. I think she'd come off a weight class and I'd gone down. I was kind of worried about her jiu-jitsu. It looked like she had quite good jiu-jitsu, but I out-grappled her for... guillotining people. I basically spent the whole first round obsessively trying to guillotine her, and then, which probably wasn't the best idea, but I won that round, And second round, I was like, oh, screw this. So I just hit her a lot. And I think it ended towards the end of the second round with me on top. I tried doing like the double-handed like Hulk smash on her from mount,
Oh, really?
just for fun. And then went back to hitting her, and I got hauled off her. Like, you know, a few seconds after that, and I was just like, oh shit, was that not allowed? Did I do something wrong? And I was just being pulled off because, yeah, the ref had had enough and the fight was over. But yeah, I got into the house, and I was like, all the British women got in, so like Helen Harper, Lanchana Green, who I'm still really good friends with, we got in, so that was really good, and I was excited about that. But I'd kind of planned on, like, Kerry Hughes had come out again, so she watched us, and I was sort of, we had our backup plan of we were going to spend a couple of weeks training out there, and everything was arranged. It was something like, shit, like this isn't going to happen. I'm now, like, going to be stuck in the tough house for 5 weeks. So, yeah, I was, because I'd want to fight, so I was really excited to get in. But then the reality hits, and it's a massive loss of control. Like, you lose all your independence, and someone else is in charge of everything, including your training. Which obviously, you start to extend your coaches, like, are in charge of your training, but I'm kind of in charge of what I actually turn up to, and I know what's going to happen in advance for the most part. And suddenly just having to turn up to the gym twice a day with Brazilian coaches. I'm really, really glad I was on Claudia's team. And her coaches were all really good, but you're still turning up and being coached in their second language. And the boxing coach didn't speak any English at all. And I need clear, concise instructions. Like, I can't follow striking. Like, I still need... If we're doing striking combos, I still need the names of the strikes to go along with the combos, and I was getting them in Portuguese, and that was horrendous for me. So I just found it all really difficult because I'm not at all outgoing, and then having a microphone hung around your neck permanently, that really, really sucked.
And cameras following you everywhere as well.
Yeah, well, every time you started talking about anything interesting, the camera crew would appear in the doorway. And my instinctive reaction to that, especially if I'm talking about something vaguely personal, is to stop. Because there are strangers in the doorway. Not only that, strangers with cameras, which obviously doesn't go down very well on a TV show.
Yeah, it kind of defeats the purpose of it, really.
So, yeah, it was really hard because I went in there. I made weight 116, and the next couple of days, I was 129 pounds, and I didn't know how to get that off. And you're in a position where you could be fighting at 3 days' notice, and I dieted really, really hard the whole time I was in there, which just because you can order whatever food you want, just made it that much worse. That whole time I was in there, and I'm used to dieting electronically as well. I keep track, online, and you have no internet access, so I was having to like manually calorie count. And we all have our own little diaries, so they film you writing in your diaries like you're doing something really exciting, and I'm literally just there writing out like a load of numbers, which was really strange.
You're putting your diary inputs in code so they can't read it.
Yeah, and then even when you come out, they expect you to do a load of media work, which obviously isn't unreasonable, supposed to promote the show, but I had to write a newspaper column every week, and I had to remember back like 3-4 months to what I was doing week by week for the show, and that was just really strange because you're describing something that's been and gone, and kind of you've lost the finer details of it by that point.
You just make it up.
Yeah, well, a little bit. I mean, you can kind of remember stuff, and
I'd have made loads of stuff up. I'd have tried to make it like as bizarre and as weird as possible.
But Yeah, and it was strange because they expected you to watch. They sent you in advance, expecting you to watch it. I was like, I didn't want to watch it. Like, I was like, well, that's in the past. Did not enjoy that. Do not want to watch it back. And you have to pretend it's like really cool and really interesting. And I know it is kind of, but
from a personal point of view, it probably isn't, because most people don't like, unless you're really vain, don't like looking or listening to themselves either. So if you're not used to that, and then you do like end up watching yourself back, it's just like, oh my god. Yeah, it can. I can imagine it'd be quite difficult. How many fights did you have on the Ultimate Fighter?
I had, so it was the first one to get in, and that was then 16 down to 8, and then I had the quarter-final match against Ashley Yoder, who is still in the UFC.
She just fought this weekend.
Yep. And I can't remember who she was at the time. I think she was really worried about fighting me because I was a 7-2, which I didn't think was that big a deal, because she'd had a load of amateur fights. So I think she was like 4-1 or 4-2 or something, 5-1. I don't know. I can't remember what it was at the time, but I didn't think it was that big a difference. And she'd had all the Ami fights that I'd never had. But yeah, she was worried about my experience when I thought it was quite even. And I mean, it wasn't a particularly exciting fight. It went to a 2-round decision. I won both rounds. And it was mostly on out-grappling her. I spent most of the first round stuck in an armbar. And I was elbowing her from there. And it was really boring. Oh, and I got up-kicked when I had both knees on the ground, I think. Okay. Which is not legal. So it was an illegal up-kick, that, which is the only reason I got armbarred in the first place. Because, I got up kick like under my chin when I wasn't expecting that to happen, and then I think I dropped into a guard, into like arms in tight, or probably weren't that tight if I got armbarred, but I temporarily went to like safety position in inverted commas, and I think that's where she took the armbar from. So yeah, but I won that round because I was on top and hitting her. And same thing kind of happened in the second round, I guess. I took her down. I think she tried to Kimura me against the cage. I enjoyed it because I was in her corner, and Robert Drysdale was trying to talk her through subbing me. And I was like, nope, not happening. That is not happening. And
I always found that like a really weird concept as well, especially in grappling matches where you've got the coaches shouting to the person that you're fighting about what they should do, and like, dude, you're telling me what they're gonna do. Like, literally, what is the point? I mean, it's obviously different in MMA, but
it's kind of the same. But,
it is, yeah.
Yeah, I was just like, he's quite a famous grappling coach, and I was like, still not gonna sub me. So yeah, I won a 2-round decision, and then all of the 4 women that were left were my team. Which was horrible, and I was the last fight of that round as well. So it was literally that straight on to matching you against one of your own team members, and I was actually really good friends with Lanchana, so I'm glad that I didn't get matched against her. But then I got matched against Tatiana, and I didn't want that fight. I didn't want to fight again, whatever it was, like 7 days later. Didn't want to make weight again. I wanted to go home. I'd had enough, and Tatiana very, very much wanted it more than me, because in that fight I wouldn't say gave up exactly, but I'd kind of convinced myself it was fine by the time I'd gone out there. But fighting someone you've trained with is really weird. Like I expected certain things that were, not to say illegal, but
they're quirks, don't you? Because you've trained with them quite a lot.
Yeah. So I didn't even really care about the outcome of that fight at that point, because the more exciting thing that was happening that day is that we were finally being allowed out of the Tough House. And so yeah, Tatiana won, which fair play. She is very, very good, and she's injured at the moment. I think it has been for a year, so I'm looking forward to her getting back to fighting again, because I think she's got the potential to be UFC's strawweight champion in that division.
I can't remember. Did she won? She won.
She won
in the end,
yeah,
didn't
she? Won the
yeah.
whole thing. Yeah, I knew she would. She subbed Amanda Cooper as well.
I was going to say that was a 50-50 shot there. I was like, did she win or not? I can't remember.
Yeah, no, she is very good. She's still undefeated. She just hasn't fought for, I think, over a year now.
Yeah, her grappling's pretty decent too, isn't it? It's quite nice to watch too.
Yeah, she's a very dominant wrestler, so she's got that. Obviously got that background, and she's a brown belt now as well. So it's a very solid combination.
So after the Tough House, and you came back, what was the next step for you?
That was really hard, because you couldn't fight again until I came back here at the start of March, and the Tough finale was July, and I couldn't fight until then.
Oh, that's right, because it's like 2 or 3 months after you've come out, then it actually gets shown.
Yeah,
it's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, so it was a while, and so they don't tell you anything. Like, you could be fighting. Like, they matched quite a lot of people on the Tough finale, but we were sort of like, okay, what's going on? Finally got our sort of, we don't want Kate on the show back. Didn't take any of the UK fighters. I think they took the 2 finalists. I think they took out, I don't know whether Ashley Yoda and who else? Christ, still friends with her on Facebook. Completely forgotten her name. She's still fighting UFC as well. God, I've gone blank. But they took 2 of the American women who, I think they had one Invicta fight, and then I think they maybe then went into UFC at short notice. So I think it's one of those, like, being in the UK screwed me over. Like, if I'd been in America or whatever, then they might have taken me. But that didn't happen. So I went to Thailand that summer in August for the rest of the year. Train in Thailand, which is pretty cool. I think my striking game improved. God knows what it was like before, but my striking game improved out there. Not through doing Muay Thai, because the way they do Muay Thai, or is it Tiger Muay Thai mostly, and it's quite commercial out there. I think unless you want to fight that sport, it's not so helpful for MMA. But the K1 out there at the time was really good, so that was helpful. And the jiu-jitsu there was good. So, but I came home at the end of the year, and I was very ready to come home by that point, because it's incredibly hot and humid, and you have to worry about getting staff and stuff like that. So it was good to come back, and that was kind of just as Flo opened, or when was that? Start of 2017. So we were in the building we're in now by then, so that was good. And I had one more fight at strawweight. That was the worst weight cut I've ever had, 4 kilos.
That was the British Challenge MMA.
Yeah, who are now, I think, Cage Warriors Southeast. But I fought Bryony Tyrell, who is and was a friend, and the only time I've ever fought a friend, and I didn't particularly enjoy it. I finished by TKO, like, strikes on the floor, but I was not enjoying that, and the whole time I was just like looking at the ref like, why aren't you stopping this? Please stop it, and he did eventually. And then I got offered a fight on Bellator later that year in New York State, so that was the start of the whole Bellator, my Bellator career.
Did they just pick you up? Was it a case of you got a phone call and said, do you want a contract with Bellator and it's yours if you want it? It
was my coach, Mark Rowlett. was friends with one of the guys at my current management company, and they said like Bellator are looking for a flyweight, would Kate be interested in being put forwards, and that's what happened. And Bellator offered me a 4-fight contract, which is actually pretty cool because I didn't really know that at the time, but they offer quite a lot of 1-fight contracts as well, and then like go from there based on the outcome. So I guess they must have wanted me to bother to do that in the first place, which is pretty cool. And yeah, I've fought for them ever since.
Yeah, so you've had 6 fights in Bellator, haven't you?
3 and 3, which is not ideal, but yeah.
No, but it's kind of. I don't know. I am a what do you call it? Not supporter. I am kind of like a follower, really. And when I'm watching stuff like that, I've watched your fights, especially since training here at Flow, and you're supporting that person because you know them, and you train with them and stuff as well. It just puts a little bit of a different perspective on it a little bit too. So I personally think that you're the type of person that will definitely learn from your mistakes, and especially your last 2 fights, I reckon you're going to come back and nail it personally. But how's your experience been with Bellator? Because you've been through, like I said, 8 different productions, and you've been through sort of like the UFC process as well, even though it was a TV show. How has your experience been with Bellator compared to all the others?
As far as I know, they're more laid back than the UFC, which I appreciate. Like we can choose our own sponsors and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is, so they sort of tell me what they need from me, and they run up to a show, and a lot of it's medical stuff, like the basic paperwork and everything, and I give that to them. I turn up, they give me a schedule. As long as I follow that, then I'm pretty much free to go do what I like around that, which normally is one of the best parts. It's a good part of the sport, like the ability to like travel different places and go and do sightseeing and stuff, as well as everything else you have to do in fight week. And even if it's just London, it's nice to be able to do that. I like fighting in London as well because it's still 4 hours from us, but it's close compared to a lot of places, and friends in the area and family and everything. So that's good. The last one was COVID's basically ruined everything. I appreciate the opportunity I got last time, but having the fight at 4 weeks' notice, I know it's the same for both of us, but just the pressure to make weight, and just the difficulty with all the medical stuff. The medical stuff for the last fight was absolutely horrendous to sort out, because it's always slightly different depending on like which country you're fighting in, which commission it is. So last time was like really stressful, and like moving to Plymouth like 2 weeks before the fight, sorting that all out. So yeah, all of that was a lot more difficult than normal, I think.
Out of like your entire career, what do you feel has been like the most prolific fight that sticks out in your head? What's the one that you remember the most about?
I enjoyed Lena Vichnikova, and that was I think only June last year. Seems like a long time ago now. That was Wembley Arena in London. Fighting in Wembley Arena is pretty cool. and it was just like having a good fight camp, a good run up to it, knowing exactly what my game plan was, exactly what her little tells were, just being able to drill everything, go into that fight knowing that I had everything where it needed to be, and the run up to it was good. Like being able to be in the gym. I think that fight was a Saturday night. I think I was in the gym on the Tuesday beforehand, like I did last session with my coach in the gym the Tuesday beforehand with Steve, and then just going up to London, like it all went really well. Like the photo shoot went really well. I actually because it was London, there was no COVID stuff interfering. I actually managed to get someone, it's not a guy problem, but got someone to do my hair and makeup so that I didn't have to like try and do that myself because I'm terrible at it. And then I got a first round finish, and I had friends and family and some teammates there. That was really cool. And then I guess Hawaii, regardless of how that fight went, that whole experience is one I really appreciate.
Yeah, that must have been really cool. And I think your jiu-jitsu coach appreciated the trip out there, seeing as Candice just turned up. One of the questions that I actually asked somebody at work, what should I ask you? And he said, what do you find is the main difference when you're training with males and females? Because obviously in different MMA gyms, especially like the American gyms, you've got the guys and the girls trained together. And like you were saying earlier, I think your first fight that you had where you said she didn't like being hit in the face by the guys. So my question is what, in your opinion, is the main difference? Do you enjoy training with both, or how do you find the differences between the two are? What do you think they are?
I think now it's easier. Like initially, the training of women kind of feel like you maybe have to hold back a bit, but the levels there now that you can go train with other pros, and you can both. You don't need to worry about whether or not your training partner's holding back. I mean, obviously sometimes you do, depending on who you're training with, but with guys, there's always like, if you keep upping like what you give them, is there the point where they push back and you break because they're bigger or stronger than you? So I like both, really. I'm fairly strong, so like the smaller guys aren't such a massive issue, but at the same time, like women tend to, especially the lower weight classes, women tend to be I guess more flexible. There's a difference in the sort of the movement. It's even more noticeable in jiu-jitsu comps, really. Like the lower end of my weight class in jiu-jitsu, the game tends to be different. They tend to be very flexible. At one point I had a problem at purple belt with a closed guard, but now it seems to be the sort of the 50-50 game and the sort of the hyper flexibility of the guard retention, which when I'm allowed to actually compete properly again, will be, that's a challenge I want to meet and beat as well. Hopefully the big comps will start happening again next year.
I was thinking about this because I thought if I was if I was flipped rolled, so if I was female, what would be my sort of view on it? And I think if you're a competitive person, which you obviously are, a highly competitive person, I would kind of relish training with people that are bigger and stronger than me. And like you're saying, it's the same in jiu-jitsu, isn't it? You can say you're going to, have a light roll or something, but as soon as someone like ups it a little bit, then you level it up, and then you keep going and going, and then before you know it, you're going 100%. I could imagine if you're in that position and you've got guys that can go harder and harder and harder, it's only going to make you better because you're training with people that are bigger and stronger so when you come to actually do it at your catch weight or your weight that you fight at, it's probably going to make it easier. You know, the classic saying, you know, fight, train hard, fight easy, and all that sort of cliche stuff. Do you think that's a purposeful statement or not?
I think earlier on that was one of the arguments. Like, I train, like, you know, women saying they train with men, so like another woman's not going to be a problem. But they're all training the same way, or were all training the same way. So I don't think that necessarily works. It is different. I like the mixture of the two. I'm glad that I'm good enough now, especially with jiu-jitsu, that I can see they're smirking.
No.
I can read what someone's about to do. So if I think they're going to do something dangerous or something that hurts me, I have the option of very grudgingly giving up position to protect myself. And it was a lot harder before I had the ability to do that, because they do something explosive I do something explosive and they meet it with a lot of force. I don't see it coming, and if you can't see it coming, you can't protect yourself from it. And knowing I have that helps a lot.
Well, that's definitely, you know, your experience and your time in training. I mean, what you've been training, nearly 15 years now, just over that. So, you know, is that right? 15? Can I do my maths right?
It depends which sport, but yeah.
Yeah. Been training for a while, so, you know, you kind of would expect that a little bit, you know, having that experience, because it's all about people. At the end of the day, any martial art really is all about body movement, isn't it? And being able to read what somebody's doing by certain movements, and you know, when you get to a high level like you are, you know, you kind of at the pinnacle of reading those movements, which I think is probably key to being where you are now. We've been going for about an hour and 20 now, so I've got one last question for you. All right, and it is, if you have advice for anyone, men or women, getting into martial arts or MMA, what would be your key advice for them?
Find a good team. Find someone to train that you're comfortable, and that you have a wide range of teammates with different styles that can push you, and make sure that you have a good range of good coaches as well. It's probably, I mean, you're moulded by who coaches you and who your team is. And it's a lot easier if you start off training the right way. Then you don't have to, it minimises what you have to then undo further on down the line, which I am finding out, unfortunately. So I think, yeah, there's so many more options nowadays. So yeah, find a good team and just work your way up slowly from sort of, you know, through competitions or whatever it is you want to achieve.
Perfect answer. Kate Jackson, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and thank you for coming on the podcast.
No worries, thank you.